How would it feel if you knew your family was ready to handle any situation that life threw at you? Sounds pretty good, right? In this video, we're going to talk about 6 strategies you can use to get more prepared in the coming year. Here at Preparedness, we want you to be prepared, not scared. We want you to know that you can handle any situation that life throws at you. So when I'm working with new preppers, what I really love to do is to talk about prepping in terms of categories. I think this is a really useful tool that we can use because when we start looking at prepping in terms of the things that can happen to us, whether that's a natural disaster or economic crisis, it can get a little bit overwhelming when we think about all the things we need to do and buy and learn. However, if we break it down into components, into 6 categories, we can really make progress so that we can feel more confident no matter what life throws our way. So with that, let's start with water. Water is one of those things that you have to survive. The simple math is gallons times days times people. FEMA recommends that each person keep at least a gallon of water per day per person for your family. I would argue that a gallon is not nearly enough. The average American uses more than 100 gallons of water per minute. Now, obviously that includes things like taking showers, washing dishes, keeping our clothes clean. And so some of those things are gonna fall off the table when we are in a preparedness situation. However, a gallon of water is the minimum that you need to survive. I would encourage you to store 2 to 3 gallons per person at least in your house. The FEMA and Red Cross recommend that we store 14 days of water. I would recommend using that as your absolute minimum. And if you can get to 20 or 30 days, that's even better. The second category is food. So the first layer that you want to think about is just those shelf-stable foods that your family already eats. You want that food that you can just make quickly, even if you don't have power. You want things that are easy on the shelf. Think peanut butter and jelly, ramen noodles, cereal, crackers. We keep a lot of canned soups and stews, things that we could just heat up if we needed to really quickly, that are easy to make and that provide some level of sustenance. The second layer of food is going to be those things that you store for longer term. This is going to be things like your normal canned goods, but maybe in a larger quantity. And it's also going to be things like dehydrated food or freeze-dried food. These need to be food items that your family already eats and enjoys. Don't get exotic, don't get crazy. Please don't rush out and just buy a bunch of MREs. As someone who has been in the military and eaten MREs, let me just tell you that is not the food option that you necessarily want to go for long term. Yes, they have a place. Yes, MREs can be useful as part of your food storage, but don't just rely on MREs. So the third category is medical supplies. Medical supplies start with things like Band-Aids and gauze and cold medicine and Tylenol and Advil. Those are kind of your baseline medical supplies that everybody should have in the house. One of the things I see when people start looking at medical supplies for prepping is they get online and they look at all of these lists that have all of these medical supplies listed and things like tourniquets and C-lock and chest wound seals. If you don't know what those are, that's okay. I would just caution you, if you are going to go down the trauma kind of side of medical supplies, make sure that you've also received the training so that you can use those supplies. Again, the supplies that we have in our house are only as good as the skills that we have to go with them. The fourth category is your household supplies. When you think about your household supplies, just think about those things that you use on a daily basis that you wouldn't want to run out of. Again, this is stuff like toilet paper and paper towels and cleaning wipes that we saw all run out during COVID. It's supplies that you use on a regular basis, whether that is soap or deodorant or toothpaste, anything that you need to keep your household running smoothly. We also want to think about those things that we need in terms of the shelter piece. How are you going to stay warm? How are you going to stay dry? And how are you going to stay out of the elements? The fifth category is one that maybe you haven't thought of from your preparedness journey, and that is just finances. And there's a couple of different elements to this. The first one is just talking about getting your financial house in order. For us, that means really reducing all of our debt and having as few payments as we can. It means having an emergency fund, and it means having cash on hand if something happened and we couldn't get cash out of our bank very easily. When we have a financial buffer, we don't have to worry as much about economic downturns or even inflation, honestly. The reality is almost none of us have an unlimited cash supply that we can throw at this prepping journey, and preparedness can get expensive. And so I want to be realistic about that. As you're looking at getting your plan started, one of the things you want to do is really sit down and figure out, what is my prepping budget? How much money per week or per month am I comfortable spending achieving this particular goal? All right, so the last section is about security. And this one can get a little touchy too, so we're gonna just kind of talk broad picture. At some point we'll dive into some of these topics, but what I want to do is just say, think about security, because security is part of your preparedness plan. That can be as simple as making sure that you are locking your doors, putting up some floodlights outside, really thinking about some ways to increase your security at your house so that you are more comfortable if there is an emergency and emergency response personnel can't show up right away. When we think about being in an emergency situation, we want to think about how do we keep our home and ourselves secure. Now, for some of us, that may mean taking self-defense classes. For some of us, that may mean buying firearms. Whatever your security plan is, we just want you to think about it holistically. We can also be talking about things like we call OPSEC, or operational security. That really means being mindful about who you are sharing all of your preparedness journeys with. So there's a little bit of risk when you go out and you start talking about all the things that you're storing and all the things that you have in your house and the things that you're doing to get prepared. So I would just say, be mindful of who you're sharing that information with and be thoughtful about what you are talking about in open settings. So those are the 6 categories that I love using to help people think about their preparedness journey. Again, that gives us this idea of being able to sustain ourselves in any sort of emergency situation. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you liked the content, if you enjoyed it, just do me a favor, hit subscribe, hit like. If you haven't done so already, it really helps and I really appreciate it. Again, drop a comment below if you have any questions. I love to hear what is on your mind.